Development Program. I'm your moderator for this webinar series on the impact of COVID-19 on elections. I'm joining from Amman, Jordan. This is our 8th webinar in the series, and we're happy to report that we've reached around 900 participants through Zoom, more than 550 views of the session on our YouTube channel, and some 19,000 views on Facebook. For those of you who have followed us regularly, you'll know we have gained a great deal of insight into how elections, election preparations, and electoral assistance is being shaped by the pandemic. We've learned from the experiences of places like Mexico, Bolivia, Tunisia, Chile, Egypt, Somalia, Libya, Mali, Georgia, the United States federally, as well as the US states of Wisconsin and Carolina. I may have forgotten other cases we have presented to you. We've also heard from our partners, the League of Arab States, the Arab EMBs, and of course the UN's Electoral Assistance Division. We've learned how the global pandemic has forced governments and electoral authorities around the world to make difficult decisions on how to proceed with planned elections. Globally, from February to August, around 70 countries have postponed elections thus far, while 56 decided to go forward with elections, including Jordan and Moldova. These sessions have featured discussions around some key questions, questions on whether electoral legal changes are needed to postpone elections, what the criteria is for deciding to postpone or go forward with an election, the kinds of health safety measures are needed and feasible given the impact of the pandemic and given the socio-political and economic context of the country. What are the alternative voting methods that can balance both the integrity of elections and public health safety? And will voters actually turn out to vote? This is a big question for our panelists today and for all electoral authorities who are organizing elections during this pandemic. What will E-Day look like? These are the questions that have guided our discussions in previous webinars. They also frame today's panel discussions on Jordan and Moldova. While it is still unclear how the pandemic will affect election day in these two countries, it has certainly influenced planning and preparations of the commission and of the chairman and how they lead their institution in organizing these elections. And we are here today to hear just how they are moving forward, how they are overcoming the challenges posed by the government restrictions to movement and gatherings, and how they are coordinating internally and externally to ensure both the integrity of the election process, election day, and the safety of their citizens. We're really privileged to have the chairpersons of the IEC Jordan and CEC of Moldova. With less than 90 days to election day, you will understand that they are very busy. They're under a lot of pressure. But they are here with us and we're grateful for their time. These are unprecedented times that are challenging the health of democracies around the world. Your participation today, both as speakers and audience, is of great service to the global election community and to ensuring the integrity of elections is maintained. Before turning to our panel, I will encourage all of you again to interact with the panel and with each other through the chat box by sharing your comments and questions. Our speakers are joining from Amman and Chisinau. Each of our panel members will speak for 15 minutes before we open to a 45-minute Q&A session. Again, we're offering this webinar in English, Arabic, and Romanian. Please let Osama know if in the chat box if you're unable to access interpretation services. Dear panel members, please be aware you have a mixed audience today. We have electoral authorities and practitioners from around the world. We have UN and non-UN experts. We have civil society representatives. We have youth groups. We're also joined by regional and international organizations that are working closely with election assistance and commissions. They are joining to hear how the pandemic is impacting your country, the upcoming elections, and your work as an electoral authority. I would like to turn to our first speaker, Dr. Khaled Al-Khalalde. Chairman Khalalde is joining us from his office in Amman, Jordan, where he's leading the country's preparations for the upcoming elections. They are to be held on 10th November. This is the third time the country will see parliamentary elections since beginning reforms almost a decade ago. As many of you may know, Jordan has received a lot of accolades for its handling of the pandemic thus far. The numbers here are relatively low, As of yesterday, there are about 1,084 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. The country has seen 24 deaths. There are also restrictions. There are nightly curfews, restrictions on large gatherings, mandatory use of face masks in public areas. These are all, this is sort of the context that's framing how the chairman and the IEC is preparing for elections. Chairman, thank you again. You have 15 minutes. We'll pass over to you.
مساء الخير. كما فهمت الدور لي لا أستطيع سماعكم. لا أعلم إذا كنتم تسمعوني.
دكتور خالد احنا بنسمعك كويس، بنسمعك بشكل ممتاز.
شكرا لك. الحقيقة بشكركم بهذه المناسبة تبادل الخبرات في مسألة جديدة تجتاح العالم، ليس الأردن وحده. وكما تفضلت الست ناجية في بداية الحديث، هناك دول سبقتنا في مسألة الانتخابات.
There were some countries that preceded us in conducting their elections with the context of COVID-19. It's true that we are reviewing other countries' experiences, and we compare the electoral law and other laws that are applicable in Jordan, whether pertaining voters registrations, voters list, and we try to have criteria that was in line with the pandemics commission, which talks about the gatherings and assemblings of people, of public in such a pandemic, and we follow the directions of them. The electoral law in Jordan assume number of stages for the electoral cycle. Some of those stages we could handle remotely without direct contact, physical contact, whether about the centers, polling centers, or the civil status departments. But we had also some amendments so that if the voter has to be physically in such institutions and to do whatever is needed to, like for example, any objections, any appeals, even registrations, the candidacy or voting, to do all these activities without risking his health or being subject for the infection. The electoral law conditions that the voters need to be there according to the law or regulation of the open list. So we have number of constituencies, and in each governorate we have one constituency, except for the three largest governorates, Amman, Irbid, and Zarqa. So they have 5 and 4 and 2 constituencies, and also the Badia, the southern Badia, has also one constituency. Previously, indications used to say that the list want to nominate themselves, they need to be physically there at the polling center and to name the list and its candidates. And this is the second time that this electoral body is being applied since 2017. And just like I said previously, the list need to be totally there in the meeting, and whoever comes there is going to have the number 1 in printing out the lists. And in last circle, we had 100 something. I couldn't hear the exact number, so it depends on the constituencies, but the average was 10. So as I mentioned, the list that goes first is going to have number 1 in the numbering of the list. So there could be some crowdedness at the first day. So we had to facilitate things for them on the first page and also at the last page, meaning in the beginning of the registration and at the end of the registration. So we had some amendments. So each list can go in separate. So if we have like 10 lists per day, so we would be able to register these lists without being overcrowded, because the location in the booklet of voting, it has nothing to do with the voting or with the importance of voters. So we amended those regulations, and after having all the lists registered, each list is going to nominate their deputies, and they need to be there at the third day. And only the deputies of those lists are going to be there in the center, and we will have a lottery out of these deputies. So each list would have its place in the list. So by this, we avoided having overcrowdedness in the locations of registration of the list. After this, the campaigning. The campaigning were kind of festivals when they opened their campaigning location. Some people may gather in thousands in one place, in one location, and they start speaking about their plan, about their giving their discourse. But this time we prevented having such assembling locations. It's prohibited, and we said that the indications issued by the Pandemic Commission, it is as follows, like 20 in total, or maximum of 20 in one location, keeping the social distancing, and also having the procedures for safety, most important of which is the mask, and also not to provide desserts or food or beverages, because previously they used to do so. But this time we added on these indications that only water is provided in small bottles, and a bottle for each, so they wouldn't share any bottle. And after the campaigning, we move to the voting stage. And this has the big share of safety procedures. So the indications were as follows. Number of ballot boxes that were available in the latest elections were 800.
معالي الدكتور خالد معالي الدكتور خالد أنا آسف جدا على المقاطعة، لكن إذا تسمعيني في مجال.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Gita, if you hear me.
إذا بتسمعيني اعملي اميوت لحالك جيتا، انت ميوتد وما حدا بسمع الترجمه الرومانيه. اذا في مجال بالضبط، وارجعي على القناه الالمانيه. اذا في مجال روحي على القناه الالمانيه. ممتاز جدا. اسف على المقاطعه معالي الدكتور خالد، تفضل.
شكرا. اذا كنا نقوم بتوزيع الناخبين على 4884 صندوق. هذه كانت او المراكز الانتخابيه يكون فيها اكثر من صندوق، كانت تحوي 2000 و 3000 ناخب. اين تكون النسب في العاده متدنيه في الاقتراع. المناطق الحضريه نسب متدنيه تكاد تكون حوالي 20%، بينما في المناطق البعيده والمحافظات وفي البوادي الثلاثه نسب الاقتراع تتجاوز 60 الى 70%. لذلك في هذه المره عندما نوزع الناخبين على الصناديق ناخذ بعين الاعتبار نسب الاقتراع من المرات السابقه، بحيث يتمكن عدد الناخبين المسجلين في صندوق واحد ان ينتهوا خلال 12 ساعه التي يقرها القانون دون تمديد من السابعه.
Going to
una la ora 7 seara.
On in day, so we doubled the ballot boxes, and we increased the polling stations and centers. And at the same polling center, we also increased number of ballot boxes, so they won't be overcrowdedness when they reach the polling center. The voter is checked if he's wearing the mask or not. He's going to be given gloves and a pen. He's not to wear his own gloves. And then after that, when he enters the polling station, the employee that is responsible for the computer documentation is going to be checking his ID. The employee is going to have a new reader that we provided this time. It is going to scan the barcode of his ID, and he will have data of the voter directly on his screen. And there would be a screen also directed to the observers. So they would make sure that this voter is the same that is listed in the voters list, and he's the one to vote in this polling station. Then he's going to sign the paper because the electoral law conditions that he needs to sign the paper, but this time wearing the gloves, he's going to be handed this paper to sign it, and he's going to the employee is going to explain for him that this is the list, and from this list that you are going to vote, you need to vote for the candidate and to mark or check next to the candidate. Then he's going to take this paper after he's being in the booth voting, and he's going to the ballot box, and the lid of the ballot box is going to be opened by the employee, and he puts his ballots and it's going to be closed. The lid is going to be closed, and the employee is going to ask the voter to put back the pen. After putting back the pen, he's going to get rid of the gloves and to put it in the trash basket. And then afterwards, his left index is going to be put in the indelible ink. We try to spray it, but due to the silver nitrate that is kept on the finger, the spraying wasn't successful because the silver nitrate would be more fixed on the left index. So that's why we kept the indelible ink. And then he leaves. So we provided some conditions, the conditions of candidacy, and also the voting and polling in the most proper way, so we wouldn't have overcrowdedness, but we have to have a physical existence due to the law. And when we looked at the tables or lists, we are done with the stage of objecting or appealing over the lists, and now we are about to publish the appeals that were approved, and the Civil Status Department and IEC are working on publishing or are working on these objections, so we would amend the voters list and then to be finally published. I think he said in the 15th of this month. I couldn't get to the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That was a good overview. You've already put in place measures. I know I've been to your commission. There's a lot of work you staff are doing to make sure that voters turn out, but also that you keep their safety. I think we will have sufficient time to have a discussion over the measures you're putting in place in Jordan. Some questions are already coming in. I will just now move on to our second speaker, if you will, Dr. Chamil Doreen, the chair of the Central Election Commission of Moldova. Dr. Doreen was appointed chairman last year. He has a legal background and is an academic. He's in charge of preparing for and conducting the upcoming presidential elections scheduled to take place on the 1st of November. These elections are important for Moldova. It will be the second direct presidential election since 2016. The election is held as a single nationwide constituency. In terms of the pandemic, Moldova currently has about 11,400 confirmed active cases of the virus, with 1,123 unfortunate deaths. While all services are currently open in the country, I understand there are restrictions to gatherings of more than 50 people, and those in public places have been asked not to congregate in groups of more than 3. There are also restrictions for those aged 63 and above. These are significant challenges for organizing elections. But Dr. Doreen has also the added challenge of ensuring that at least 1/3 of registered voters turn out on election day. Thank you, Dr. Doreen, for joining us. We're very happy you're here and taking the time to share the experience of your country with us. You have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar. In particular, I'd like to thank my colleague, Dr. Halim, for this invitation and for the possibility to communicate with such an international community. I would like to inform you that in the Republic of Moldova, it is a small country which spreads on 33,846 square kilometers, densely populated from the southeastern part of Europe. The population being of about 3.5 million inhabitants. It has as neighbors Ukraine in the north and Romania in the west. The capital is the biggest city of the country and is called Chisinau. The voting right is held by the citizens with the age over 18 years old, except for those who have been deprived of this right, whose incapacity has been recognized by final court decision. The system of proportional representation is used for parliamentary elections and local councils. The majority system in 2 tours, 2 rounds for the elections of the president and mayors of localities. The CEC is the superior hierarchic body that is a permanent body and aiming at implementing the state policy, and is formed of 9 members appointed for a period of 5 years, of which 1 member is appointed by the president of the country and 8 by the parliamentary factions according to their mandates in the parliament. On May 20, the parliament decided to organize the elections of the president of the country on November 1, 2020. The decision entered into force on August 15 current year. According to the calendar approved by the CEC, the Central Electoral Committee, the election period started on August 25 current year, which starts at least 60 days before the voting day, and it has a duration of maximum 90 days normally. As regards the state voters registry, on September 2 current year, the total number of voters registered in this was 3,290,312. This registry is formed based on the state register of the population and is constantly being updated. Of the total number of voters registered in this registry, 2.8 million 689 citizens with the right to vote are attributed to territorial administrative units of 2nd level with addresses and official residence, and are going to be included into the main or basic voters list. The others will be voting based on supplementary or additional voting lists. The citizens have the possibility to check the data in the state registry of voters on the official webpage of the CEC. 22 days before the election day, they can check also this information at the premises of the electoral board. At the same time, on the official webpage of the CEC, the citizens with a voting right can register beforehand. We'd like to mention that the procedure is an optional one and is used by the CEC in order to determine the number and location of the polling stations that will be going to be established outside the country and the number of ballot papers. The preliminary registration can be done 40 days before the election day, and 25 before the election day, the citizen can cancel their registration.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just stop you for a second? Is everyone accessing interpretation? Osama, I get some messages that people are having trouble.
Najia, the interpretation is working.
Perfect, continue, thank you, sorry.
At the same time, on the official webpage of the CEC, the citizens with a voting right that are abroad can get registered beforehand. And I'd like to mention that this procedure is an optional one and is used by CEC in order to determine the number and location of the extraterritorial voting stations and determining the necessary number of ballot papers. This registration can be done 40 days before the election day, and 20 days before the election day, the citizens can cancel their registration, their previous registration. The establishment of electoral bodies. On September 11, the CEC established 36 precinct electoral bodies that are going to administer the elections at the level of districts or municipalities. Overall, we are going to have 396 people working in this. The polling stations are going to be established by this precinct station 35 days before the election day. One polling station is established usually for a minimum 30 voters up to 3,000 voters. Abroad, this will be for up to 5,000 voters. We plan to establish 218 polling stations in the country, as well as polling stations that have their residence on the left bank of Dniester in Transnistria. I'd like to mention that in Transnistria, we have a region occupied by separatist forces following an armed conflict that took place in 1992, and now it is out of the sovereign control of the constitutional authorities of the country. For these citizens, we are establishing separate polling stations on the territory of the Republic of Moldova, controlled by the constitutional authorities of the country, as close as possible to the security zone. During the presidential elections, in addition or next to the diplomatic missions and embassies of the Republic of Moldova, we are organizing one or more polling stations for those who are abroad. At the same time, with the support of the competent authorities of those countries, there are going to be organized polling stations in other localities too. The establishment of these polling stations is decided by CEC with a preliminary endorsement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Integration, based on the number of voters that have participated in the previous election, organized at the national level, and based on the preliminary registration of the Moldovan citizens that are abroad, as well as based on the information obtained by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the competent authorities of the countries of residence of the citizens of the Republic of Moldova with regard to their number and location. The first round of national elections in 2019, or for the last elections in 2019, there have been established 125 polling stations, while for the elections this autumn, we planned to and budgeted a maximum number of 150 polling stations. The decision in this sense is going to be made before September 26th. The opening of the voting station is a real challenge, in particular during this pandemic. In case of those opened on the territory of the Republic by allocation, under the conditions when in the past, most of them were located in public buildings, including in education institutions, which at the moment are working under special conditions. In the case of voting stations opened for Transnistrian inhabitants, we have situations when the local authorities refuse or do not have sufficient spaces when knowing that people from other localities are going to vote here. While for the voting stations to be established abroad, it is necessary to obtain the authorization on behalf of the host countries under the conditions when the alternative voting possibilities of voting during more days are not regulated in the law currently. The precinct offices of the voting stations are going to be established at least 25 days before the voting day, and we're expecting to have about 18,350 members working in this. So in this way, the CEC is going to be the employer of over 20,000 people on the voting day. The registration of candidates, according to the provisions of the Electoral Code, the initiative to support the candidates for the presidential elections can come from the citizens, political parties, or electoral blocks. These follow to establish initiative groups formed of at least 25 persons and maximum 100 persons that are going to collect signatures. To get registered with the CEC, all the candidates have to submit the list of those of at least 15,000 people and not more than 25,000 voters from at least half of the administrative territorial units of second level of the country, in which they have collected at least 600 signatures. Overall, at the moment, there have been filed already 16 applications to get registered. These initiative groups, of which 13 have been already registered and 3 have been refused. 3 candidates submitted already their list with signatures of their supporters, and 2 of them have been already registered as competitors. The deadline for submitting this list is 30 days before the voting day. The election campaign for all the candidates registered will start 30 days before the day of elections. As regards the training of the electoral officials, the continuous training center in the election field has approved the election plan for the presidential elections. According to this, the members of the offices are going to be trained exclusively online by means of Zoom platform. For the precinct offices, 3 persons of each of the offices, according to a combined formula of training, first online through Zoom platform and then face-to-face, having mentioned that these offices abroad are going to be trained online. At the same time, all the operators from the voting stations are going to be trained, as well as other people interested, like observers or representatives with a consultative right to vote. The conditions for entry on the territory of the country of the international observers and international journalists. The elections of the president of the country of Moldova of November 1 are going to be monitored by international observers and are going to be reflected in the international press. According to the decision of the CEC, according to the decision of the Public Health Commission, the observers and international journalists are going to be able to enter the Republic of Moldova, even if coming from the countries classified under the red one. These are not going to be obliged to respect these 14 days of self-isolation if they have no clinical signs of respiratory infection or fever. At the same time, the international observers are going to hold proof of accreditation issued by the CEC and the international journalists by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Integration. The measures for prevention of COVID-19 on the voting day, by decision of the CEC, of the Extraordinary Commission on Public Health, there has been approved an instruction or guidelines on the measures to prevent COVID during the election period developed by the CEC. These guidelines include an action plan that reflects the way in which CEC is going to administer the elections of November 1, 2020, considering the validity of the protection rules and other dispositions issued by the authorities, having as goal to make it uniform all the election procedures related to the organization, endowment, and voting stations with all the materials and equipment necessary to be able to carry out the voting during this pandemic. providing the electoral officials and all the voters with all the protective equipment in order to protect all the participants in the elections, voters and officials and candidates, as well as others involved. We are setting the following general rules, mandatory ones, to prevent and combat COVID during the elections, like, for example, keeping the social distance of at least 1.5 meters between people, the hand hygiene rules. The voters will come to the with their own pens, and the masks are mandatory in closed public spaces, and also ensuring the election officials with all the necessary protective equipment, disinfectants for hand hygiene at the entry into the voting stations, and also processing with disinfectants all the surfaces and ensuring the regime of wet cleaning of the voting stations at least 3 times per day, and also airing the space, and if possible, constant airing of the space. And also pointing the attention of the voters to the mandatory observance of the rules in the parameter of the voting stations with regard to the social distance and forbidding gatherings above 50 people. At the same time, we are going to measure the temperature of every official and voter entering the voting station, and we will not admit access to the voting stations of persons who manifest acute respiratory symptoms and if temperature is above 37.5 degrees Celsius. The citizens who are not going to be able to come physically to the voting station, including those who have symptoms of acute respiratory diseases, will be able to exercise their right to vote at their residence by filing an application with the CEC according to their residence place. The applications can be submitted in written or verbally, starting with 2 weeks before the voting day, as well up to 3 p.m. on the day of voting. The members of the CEC of the polling station that are going to be appointed or assigned to go with a mobile onto them will be equipped in the proper personal protection equipment and will be provided with transportation means. And transportation means are going to be disinfected after each case of voting. Together with UNDP, we're also implementing an information campaign for the voters on the organization of elections during COVID-19 pandemic. They're going to be developed and placed on the web pages, different materials, as well as on social networks. Video spots are going to be filmed and distributed, and also we're planning to print and display at the entry into the polling stations informative documents with regard to the hygiene measures. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chimil. That was a thorough overview of things in Moldova. Looks like there's a lot underway to make sure your citizens are safe during election day and during the campaign process. We are now in our Q&A session, so I ask all our participants to share your questions in the chat box. Many of you already have, so we'll facilitate that for you now. For those of you, you can send your questions in Arabic or Romanian and English. We will have translations available. I know that some of you had difficulty with the interpretation. The recording of this will be available in English only, but it will be available for you to watch later on. So we have a question that I think can go to both speakers. Maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Khalade. It's on what measures are being taken by the IEC or others to encourage voters not to stay home on election day or to turn out. As we are seeing globally, the turnout is low during Corona elections, not in every place, but in some places. And is any institution in your country following or tracking turnout during the pandemic? Dr. Khalade.
To encourage the voters to be at the polling centers is not only the responsibility of IEC in Jordan. We take into consideration that part of this responsibility is over the IEC pertaining raising awareness and voters information about the voting process. What are the mechanisms for voting, how to check his name in the voters list, and we have the statistics. I didn't still have today's statistics, but till this morning we have 516 or 530,000 questions and inquiries that we received. We received a lot of SMSs, and we answered directly for these questions, or through the website of the IEC, or through the hotline. So these three methods, we interact and we communicate with our public. And just like I said, we have like 85 days, and today's morning we have 35,000 inquiries. At the IEC, we had raising awareness plan to encourage the voters to be there for the electoral day. And we have two campaigns, one pertaining women, one pertaining youth. And the methods for enlightenment and information, we have a lot of them. We have videos, we have posters, we have some videos that are broadcasted at the national TV and some other channels, TV channels, and we have Facebook account that has like more than 5 million followers, and it is very interactive with its followers. And each stage is going to be separate. Like in when we present the lists, we have like a number of electronic and broadcast interviews, and we have also our volunteers that are everywhere in the kingdom, giving posters and flyers for the voters. We are going to divide the campaigning or the raising awareness in a way that goes in line with the stages of the electoral process. Now we are going to move to the candidacy and also to train the volunteers candidacy, and then to go to the constituency, and then to the tabulation and auditing. I will just, like I said, we have like 72 videos. Some of them are specialized about some stages of the electoral process. And with the modern technology, we would be able in the future and next days to apply some other methods. But till now, any person can ask about any part of the electoral process, like by his own cell phone, and to share with us our campaigns. We have number also of partners, the Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Media, civil society organizations, unions of women, parties, and also the voters themselves. They target the voters, so they also have a part of the responsibility. I just like to add an idea about the structure of the voters' age. And by the way, women in the Jordanian elections has a big share, just like opposite to what's been said, like more than 50% who have voted, maybe less percentages for men. So what is fantastic about the statistics is that the role of women, just like in previous elections, we have 1,009,000 something under the age of, and his voice was cut. Among them, 700 something thousand between 20 and 25. So 1,600,000. So this is a challenge, as you know. youth category. I named them the angry category, the category in the community that feels that they have a lot of rights, but they may lose their rights. So they try to express this with anger. So very quickly, if we have a view at all the countries, this is not only the situation with Jordan or with Arab countries. This is always the case with the youth, because they have a lot of energy, they have physical strength, they want to have jobs, but the economic situations are not helping. So this is due to some social, economic complications. So we actually depend on this category, but this is a challenge. This is a big challenge. If we can raise the percentage of the voters from this category, this is going to be very important in Jordan. Maybe the same thing in Moldavia. If we compare this percentage, the parliament of 2017, we had a percentage, I couldn't get the number, and I don't think that in this circle, the circle is going to be larger. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. You touched on several of the questions raised, so I gave you an extra time for that question, but I'll now ask Dr. Chamil if you can answer the same question in terms of turnout. What is your expectation? Do you expect turnout to be low? What measures are you taking? You did mention some of your Get Voters campaign that you have going. And maybe also if you can touch on how Moldova will deal with cases that arise from the virus being transmitted during the election. Is there anything specific planned on that? So those two questions to you, Dr. Chamil.
Yes, I will answer first about our expectations with regard to the presence of voters. I would like to inform you that for September 6th, in 2 localities of the Republic of Moldova, we have had local elections for the election of the mayors. And in these localities, we had an average presence, let's say, or above average, I would say, of the presence of voters, which means good, which is good. We know that during the local elections, citizens are usually coming in bigger numbers for elections. This is something specific with regard to the behavior of our voters, while for national elections, we are expecting a presence above the average, which would mean more than 50% of the total number of voters. Because the presidential elections are of very high interest, of special interest, both at political and social level. And during these elections, usually the presence is rather good, both in the country as well as abroad. Already, according to the information, or in the information I presented, I mentioned that for the polling stations abroad, we have budgeted opening 150 polling stations. If we will have the possibility to open these extraterritorial offices or polling stations, and the number of ballot papers transmitted to this, we are expecting around 750,000 citizens to vote abroad, which is a rather good number. But these are just some forecasts. The situation may change depending on the evolution of the pandemics. We see that as of today, some countries introduced additional restrictions, very tough ones, for entry and exit from homes, even lockdowns. So we're expecting these restrictions to be imposed in some countries at the border with Moldova. So that is why the evolution of COVID, or dynamic evolution of COVID-19, can decrease, can diminish the number of those who are going to come to vote. And the measures that we have indicated to be undertaken by the CEC based on the guidelines approved by the National Commission on Public Health Emergency gives us the possibility to ensure to a certain level the safety both of the electoral officials that are going to be located in those particular polling stations, as well as the health of the voters who are going to come to cast their vote. In addition to the traditional measures that the Ministry of Health is undertaking, we have prescribed some untraditional measures, like for example, special endowment, personal equipment of some members of the polling stations that are going to go to people's homes to give them the possibility to cast their vote, to be equipped properly with personal protection equipment, and to use disinfectant to disinfect the all the equipment, and for the person to be able to vote without touching the box many times or things like this. And maybe also will be able to ensure a good entry into the health institutions for voting of patients there. In the context of all the measures that CEC is foreseeing to be undertaken, we are also considering those conditions that are imposed by the countries of residence of our citizens. All the countries of residence where our citizens are located, that we call the diaspora, they have introduced their own rules of behavior, their own rules of fight against these epidemics. And depending on the rules that have been established there, we will try to inform our voters about the observance of some strict rules, like, for example, agglomeration over 50 people. Will try to ensure the flow of citizens that are coming to vote. And in this sense, we'd like to let you know that we have ensured the procurement with the support of our development partners like UNDP of over 250 scanners of quick reading of information from the passports and IDs of our citizens that will give the possibility to ensure the faster, let's say, casting of votes. We consider that this situation and this organization will give us the possibility to observe some correct standards of voting, considering that in the Republic of Moldova, as I mentioned earlier, we do not have any other alternative ways of voting. The parliament of our country did not provide for this possibility to express their vote remotely or beforehand or by correspondence or electronically. All these measures, unfortunately, are not available for the presidential elections in our country, so we'll have to cope with the situation, considering with the conditions we have with this ballot paper that has to be signed by the people. So these are the conditions we have, and today I've been at a meeting at the government of the Republic of Moldova, where along with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, we have discussed this issue of transfer of the polling stations that normally were organized in schools and kindergartens into other premises. It is a very serious problem because traditionally these polling stations were organized in schools in bigger spaces. Now the school programs and the kindergarten do not allow third persons to get into these buildings. And we have the strict problem of identifying urgently other spaces that can be accommodated where we can organize these polling stations. We hope very much that these sections will give us the possibility to influence positively or qualitatively the and not to allow the virus to spread during the elections, and to undertake all the measures that have been analyzed and has from the international experience of how others organize the elections, and that are recommended by the international experts during the webinars that we are participating in very often, and we are discussing a lot on these issues. This communication between ourselves is a good opportunity to inform each other, to mention what are the measures adopted by the CEC of the Republic of Moldova with a view to organizing some national elections, and also from the point of view of using those mechanisms that would give us the possibility to properly organizing the elections in a democratic way.
Thank you so much. For sure, this is very useful information to us, and I'm sure to the audience. Some really practical and innovative ways that you're addressing these challenges in Moldova. You've touched on several questions that have come up, so thank you for that. We have a question on an important topic, election observation. We had in our last webinar a session on the challenges observers are facing to take part in the election. So we want to hear from you how you're facilitating their work in both Jordan and Moldova. Do you have already confirmed missions of national or international observations taking place? And how are you facilitating their efforts? I'll give it to Jordan first.
Actually, in this electoral cycle, and due to the circumstances that all the world is going through, not only Jordan, we extended the approval of the observers, whether nationals, locals, or internationals. There was a request, official request from the EU, but the mission is going to consist of very few, taking into consideration the risks of those people and which country are they coming from, like if they are categorized as red countries or green countries. But we had a request from the EU to have like 3 observers. Of course, we welcome them and we encourage their existence, but we think that there would be other countries that would request to observe, but not the same numbers as before, due to what the world is going through. Locally speaking, till yesterday, we had 33 observing organization or authority that asked or requested observing the elections. Some of those organizations are small, some of them are big, but all of them are national. And we will take into consideration that within the polling station or a polling committee or wherever people are assembling, the indications are going to assign the numbers for those people allowed to be in small rooms or even in big rooms, keeping the social distancing and some other safety measures and indications. And just like before, the head of the committee, of the polling committee, has the authority to decide what is the number allowed within inside the room. And we have a comprehensive integrated plan to communicate with our members. And as you know, according to the law, the voter there are rights for the observers, and we are going to ask the committees to allow the minimum of people that are allowed in the room. And also, if we have 3 out of each observing organization, so this means that we are going to have 3 of them in each room. And if we multiply these numbers, this is going to be very impossible with such circumstances of COVID-19. So we are asking these organizations to cooperate with us. And this is important for everybody. If we have an observer, and if they are coming from 33 organizations, they need to understand that the room has a capacity to have within one room. And this is the basis of the indications according to the new law. We have in mind that the observation of the elections is important and is a necessity, but we need to take care of the new conditions, and also the committees, the auditing committees, and the voters tabulation need all to be safe and not to have further infections.
Thank you very much. It's great to hear Jordan has provisions and is expecting observations. Maybe we'll ask Dr. Chamil to tell us how are things in Moldova.
Yes, thank you very much. For us, the observers and their accreditation is a very important issue from the point of view of transparency and veracity of the electoral process. I'm referring here to the aspect that any observer, international or national, has to be provided with access to all the documents and processes that are taking place in the Republic of Moldova during the election period. So we have imposed this rule, considering that the election period in fact represents a time frame, a reference time frame set in the election code, and it allows the submission of accreditation applications and the examination of each application for any observer, national or international, and obtaining during 7 days from filing the application a decision on the accreditation. I would like to mention that to facilitate this process, we have established a platform for the registration of international and national observers. We have that platform that is connected with the state system elections, automated information system elections, and which allows for the processing of documents and ID of every person in order to exclude those problems that can be established during the examination of the application submitted by the observers. And the system called Observer has been implemented for the presidential elections that are going to take place on November 1, 2020. This is on the testing process at the moment, but already as of today, I can say that we have accredited over 150 observers that represent national and international observers, including applications from OSCE, from embassies accredited in the Republic of Moldova, including from the international organizations. So we are in a full campaign of getting applications and examining these applications. And I would like to mention that even at the level of entry and exit and stay in the country, we have issued some provisions or have looked at the provisions of the National Public Health Emergency Commission, saying that every observer can be admitted to the Republic of Moldova, even if coming from a red zone country, provided that he or she has no signs of fever or disease or respiratory disease, and if he or she has already the accreditation of the CEC. I would like to mention that to the observers coming to Moldova, we have the best condition. We have been informed already by OSCE about the fact that it was decided that for the presidential elections, we are going to be monitored by a number of 26 observers, permanent observers, and 200 observers that are going to come, that are going to be present at a big number of polling stations opened in Moldova as well as abroad during the voting day. But usually, in order for the presidential elections, the international observers are accredited by the CEC, while the international journalists are accredited by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. After each of the mission, we get the report on the observation mission, both of the national observers as well as of the international one. For example, the national observers submit a report from the 4 chapters. The first one has been already submitted, the first report, which means the preparation for elections, while by the end of September, we are looking forward to getting already the second report that is going to analyze the registration procedure of the candidates for presidential elections. The reports of the observers are useful because CEC, by filing the documents to the Constitutional Court to get the presidential elections validated, is also analyzing the comments made by the observers and is expressing its view on this in the final report on the elections evaluation. This is something that in the Republic of Moldova is done for a long time. It's already a tradition in this sense, and it's constantly and very well observed.
Thank you very much. There are a lot of questions and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to already jump to Dr. Kalalde, a question on political campaigns and what measures are you taking to ensure, first of all, that candidates have the ability to reach out to their voters and campaign, and then to ensure the safety of voters. What are the provisions being taken in Jordan?
Thank you for this question. I know we have little time, but I'm going to answer you quickly. What about education in schools? What about work? What about transportation? The world, according to WHO, will suffer 2 years, up to 5 years from this pandemic, until all the communities are adapting with its existence. So political parties are going to have solutions for each of the problems. They need to have solutions for people, especially. I'm praising our party. So we have some people chatting with us, and I think this number has no limit. So if we notice, the newspapers decreased, the media and TVs decreased, and the increase are happening in the social media, and this is what's going to have an impact. So we can use this. We can use these methods for awareness, for publications, and the political party they communicate. But if they cannot communicate in the traditional ways, it's the same thing that goes for others. And the candidate is suffering from something that everybody is suffering from. Everybody else is suffering from. So if this is unfair for one party, it's unfair for every party. This applies on the tribes, on the candidates, on the citizens. So this is not a strength for one party and weakness for others. No, the organized parties can, through their youth categories, interact with their audience, with the public, and And this is maybe something that the candidate from a tribe doesn't have or cannot use this way. So this is a good way to reach for the parties.
Great, thank you. Maybe the same question to Dr. Chamil on the campaigning. What provisions are being taken?
As I understand, the question was more about Roberta said, please, if you can repeat the question, I was not.
Sure. It's on campaigning and how are you ensuring that voters are safe and also that candidates have the ability to campaign with their constituents.
Thank you very much for repeating the question. I would like to say that the campaigning already starts on October 2. So here we have the same conditions provided for on organizing meetings that are foreseen for all the citizens, at least not more than 50 people in an open space or closed space, by observing all the rules like distance and so on. We have also proposed for the campaign to organize it more online, thus excluding the physical contact. We have also established some other ways of cooperation, like, for example, questions and answers by using known platforms, social networks, and emails. So everything that's about overcoming the physical contact, the contact between the candidate and citizens, all these have been mentioned and introduced into those decisions of the Public Health Emergency Commission that is regulating the way in which meetings can be organized. And in this sense, I would like to mention that there have been organized campaigns on collecting the signatures in support of one candidate or the other. And we believe that under this or these conditions are going to be respected further on by using broadly, as I mentioned, the TV, radio, internet, and other ways of communication that exclude the direct contact. In Moldova, the pandemics, like in other countries, is not solved or it's not stopped. So the virus or the infection is continuing to negatively affect. We're expecting the situation to improve, but these forecasts do not exclude some even more drastic measures in this sense. As along with the evolution of this phenomenon, the CEC is going to react by means of different normative regulatory documents to regulate the situation with regard to the meetings, communications, and other aspects that refer to crowdings or gatherings of people.
Thank you very much.
This was my answer, Jan.
We have a question that I think maybe Dr. Kalada, it's to you on, is there any provision for online voting, postal voting, and then also a question on how voters that are quarantined will be voting. What are the provisions for them?
The electoral law or the regulation is clear. There's no voting, postal voting. And what has been depended on in USA and the President Trump maybe is confident of, which is the postal voting. Millions of them, they vote by post, since they trust the physical. Since we trust the physical voting, so it's going to be predominating until something else happens. And of course, we may have in mind that all the voting will be online and remotely, but till then, I think it's too early to take such measures. Till now, we vote, we count, we audit, we calculate, we do everything in front of all the audience, and this is what we are going to follow. So this issue, I think, needs time. As for those who are confined, if there are a number of types of them. Some people are confined in locations that are specified for quarantine, like hotels or whatever. And now we are talking in Jordan about some people that are quarantined at their homes, or those who wear bracelets to follow up on their movements. So we tackle these issues. Basically, the voters list are to be finalized in 50. So if we have objections on those who are listed, and or some of them are being quarantined, whether in hotels, in caravans, or at their homes. So if there are a lot of people, like if we have 23 constituencies, so we are going to open 23 ballot boxes for this place. And we will announce these names that are taken from the list, not in papers, those who are eligible to vote. And it's going to be announced 24 hours before. Why 24 hours a day? Because he may go out of the quarantine, or it could be a day before he's quarantined. So it's going to be announced 24 hours prior to the voting. And the same thing for the home quarantine. Usually, the person who's been cautiously contained at their homes, he's not sick. It's just as cautious a procedure. So the indications are saying the same thing. Those who are listed in the final voters list, if they are confined at their homes, so 24 hours prior to voting, we are going to have a list of those. And after having the closure of the voting, we are going to have extension to have those quarantined people to vote. It could be very few numbers, like 5, 15, or whatever. So they are going to be moved in a way that the pandemic commission see proper, like in buses, in small cars. So after having all the PPEs for the employees, those people who are quarantined or who are sick are going to come to this place and to put their ballots with this extension and with this regulation. And I repeat that this experience is worth mentioning for everybody. We are looking at each other's experiences, and even the way this infection is being transmitted, it's being changing. Like at one time they say it's by kissing or by direct contact. Another time they say it's a different way. So this is a new way, and we are adapting. And same thing, same thing when they say that it is very dangerous for the elderly people, and it infects their lungs. So we need to be sure that the elderly people is to be taken, and all procedures need to be taken, like wearing masks, gloves, and we need to follow all the executive procedures that guarantee the right to vote, because this is a right for the citizen, and we need to provide all the circumstances needed to maintain their health and their integrity.
Very much. We are almost coming to a close. One last question on a topic we haven't touched, so I'll turn that first to Moldova. It's on the role of security forces. What is their role in terms of the pandemic, and how are you utilizing them and coordinating with them to ensure public safety? Dr. Chimene.
Thank you very much. Yes, in the past I was saying that we have organized some working groups with different ministries and institutions that are ensuring in different segments of public order and security, including anti-epidemiological security. So we have delegated from the Ministry of Health in these working groups people responsible, qualified persons who are appreciating the decisions of the CEC and are endorsing some of the decisions issued by the Electoral Commission. For example, at the moment, the CEC is organizing the procurement of anti-COVID equipment to endow the polling stations with all this necessary equipment, anti-COVID. And in this commission, we have involved representatives of the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, and even of the civil society that is following very carefully how the tenders are organized and how the compliance of the products to be purchased is established. It is an example of how we oversee the public spending and to see the compliance of those goods and that are procured to protect the health of the voters and of the electoral officials. Another example is the cooperation with the Ministry of Internal Affairs in order refers to public order and in the sense of cooperating with some state bodies and public authorities. The CEC has made these borders in a way accountable based on a decision of the CEC with regard to the additional responsibilities of these bodies that do present information to the CEC with regard to the enforcement of or execution of their obligations according to the electoral code and the other legislation. And every 2 weeks, we get information from these bodies about all the measures that are undertaken by each body separately. For example, we are being informed how the roads administration is working, like the document registration authority or the authority responsible for the authorization of other public services. So in this sense, we do have rather close communication, an efficient one, and we hope that all these measures will give us the possibility to cooperate directly by appointing responsible persons and intervening in any situation, crisis situation.
Thank you very much. Maybe quickly also to Dr. Kalalde on that question on security and how you're incorporating it to ensure public safety on E-Day in November.
If you mean security forces like police or health security.
Both, maybe you can touch on both because both are important.
The health security, we had a lot of indications and procedures pertaining the prevention of the infection, and those indications were given by the Pandemic Commission. And it talked about a number of people, the assembling, the safety procedures, the sterilizers, and as for the employees or our members, we had big numbers of PPE. Because and we also prepared a department in hospital for those that could be infected. Other than that, also the traditional safety procedures that are usually taken by the Pandemic Commission. While as for the other security forces and the policing role, they make sure of the protection of the polling centers, and they work under the control of the head of the committee of the polling station. So not to have an armed policeman inside the room, but only to have an officer who's unarmed to make sure that people are keeping all the procedures and following all the indications, social distancing, and he's not going to move there unless he's requested, unless he's asked for. And we are also going to have female police members. So in case there's women with veil or wearing niqab, so this female officer can check on her identity in a specific room, and one of the female officers is going to check the identity of this voter. And outside the centers, we will have a shifting and when we need to take the ballots to the tabulation centers, it needs to be updated also with the security forces, and also to make sure that all the material
وتكون متوفرة عند الحاجة إذا ما طلبت منها محكمة جهة مخولة.
begin after the elections by any organization.
Very much. I know you both have to go. It's a very busy period for you. I think we've learned a lot. I hope you have learned as much as I have on the upcoming elections in Jordan and Moldova. As you heard, a lot of measures are being put into place for election day and through the whole process to limit transmission of this virus and to also ensure voters actually turn out on election day. We know the difficulty of coordinating and ensuring all of these different elements come together on election day into a process that is safe and credible. We wish you and your people best of luck, Dr. Kalalde and Dr. Chamili. Thank you again for joining us. We hope the audience, you found this useful. We understand there were some challenges with the Romanian to Arabic translation. The English recording of this webinar is available on our YouTube channel, or it will be in a few hours. We'll also see if we can include Arabic subtitles. Again, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time with another case.